My name is Bill Gentry. I'm a divorce and family lawyer at the Gentry law firm in the Metro Atlanta area. I've worked as a lawyer in family law in Metro Atlanta for 35 years now. Family law includes divorce cases, child custody cases, legitimation, restraining orders, and a whole lot more. Our team has decades of experience. We make it our priority to give you strategic advice and compassionate care during what can often be a rough time. Today, we're very pleased to be joined by Debbie Gibbon of Gibbon Financial Consulting here to share with us her work as a forensic accountant and how her work crosses over into the field of family law. Debbie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm?
So, Bill, we're a single purpose kind of small specialty boutique firm. We're a bunch of CPAs that have a lot of experience, and we specialize in only divorce work. So we're a little different than most CPA firms. We bring a wide variety of backgrounds as CPAs to the mix, and our firm is essentially just a little divorce practice. We come alongside the attorneys, and we essentially, if it has anything to do with numbers, they'll call us and we get involved.
Well, so you talked about, let's talk a little bit about forensic accounting. If people hear that term, people use and they can misuse that term. But for a true forensic accountant like yourself, what kind of credentials do you have? And then what does it mean to be a forensic accountant?
So that's kind of a cool term, right? When I tell people I'm a forensic accountant, that automatically has a little bit of a kind of mystery to it. But essentially, our credentialing is, and we have to have certain credentials because ultimately, if the case doesn't settle, we're the ones that end up going to court and testifying with the judge. So we need to have the proper credentialing. So I'm the only testifier at my firm currently, but we have other people at my firm with similar credentials. You would look for something like a CPA, certified valuation analyst, certified fraud person, somebody who has I have probably 3 or 4 different initials after my name. But most importantly, you want a CPA and you want someone that's certified in valuation work, because some of what we do is business valuation related, and you really need credentialing in order to do that. And especially you need credentialing if you're going to testify about that.
So let's say I were to hire you and say, Debbie, I've got a divorce case. How do you approach it? What do you do? What do you say? Okay, Bill, this is what we need to tell us about that.
So, when we start off on a case, we kind of we've been doing this for a long time. And it's kind of like for me, because I have a tax background, I worked at Arthur Andersen in the tax department and another big firm here in town after that. And I can look at a tax return and kind of read a book. It's like reading a book to me. I can tell a lot of things. So when I sit down with a client and an attorney, I'll usually try to probe them about certain things. I'll ask certain questions, and that will really guide what we do for them. So we do a lot of different things for attorneys, and really, because we're part of your team, the attorney and the client really just dictate what we do. We do a little bit to a whole bunch, just depending on what they need. So for example, if I sit down with a client, and let's say I'm sitting down with a person who has had no visibility in their finances. So the first thing I understand about that is that a lot of what I do is educating them about what their assets are. So I really like to do that. I really like to help people understand. That's part of why I got into this field, is to help people understand, okay, you're going through this time, right? How can I help you understand what do you have? What do you need? How's the best way to split this all up? What are some of the things you haven't thought about? And I'll probe them, right? So it's more than just the forensic, cool kind of let's go find hidden stuff, which is a part of what we do. But a lot of it is trying to educate the clients on what, it's the first time, hopefully, maybe second time, sometimes more, but we do this all the time, right? So you and I, an attorney and we know a lot of things about it that the client has no idea, right? It's super scary, super challenging for them. So the first thing we want to do is kind of understand where are they coming from. Because we do get a lot of clients, and most families, I find that in my own family, I find this to be true. One person does the financial part and the other person maybe is not so knowledgeable about it. So if you have the person that's your client that's not knowledgeable, you really need to go about educating them.
And it's not always the husband or the wife who's you don't want to say ignorant one, but the one who doesn't know about the finances.
That's right.
I know throughout our marriage, my wife has been the one paying the bills 90% of the time. Somebody were to say, how much do you have in your 401k or your IRA? Right. I'd have no idea.
I know, right? That's just how most families are like that, right? That's just kind of how they function. And so, when you come in a divorce and unfortunately you don't know what's going on, and a lot of times people say, let's get a forensic accountant to do the discovery, kind of find the hidden stuff. And we do that. I mean, that is a lot of what we do, is look for stuff. But a lot of times it's kind of making everyone feel comfortable about what's going on, right? Especially if you have like what you consider to be an untrustworthy spouse. Something's happened, right? And it's cause of a divorce. So if they're untrustworthy in certain aspects of their life, it's possible they could have been untrustworthy in the financial part of their life, right? So we get involved in that, and usually the cases have things besides just the normal house and the 401k, right? And I know, Bill, you say the same thing that some of the other attorneys say, which is, they only hire us for maybe 10% of their cases. Right? Because most of the time the attorneys are sophisticated and they can handle, 90% of their cases, their team can handle it. So it's when you have the really complicated things, or you see the really big numbers, or you have a business that needs to be valued, or you have, a pension or stock options or something like that, we can come in and help with those types of things.
Well, I know when we start a case, and this is something, we see more and more frequently. Husband and wife have both been working. They were working from before when they got married. And maybe they've got a 401k, a 403b, even a traditional old style pension. But portions of these assets were earned before the marriage. Portions were earned during the marriage. How do you address issues like that?
So when we interview the client, usually at the beginning, we will definitely go through the timeline, right? So we want to know, because that's a lot of what we do as well, is we help identify separate assets and we help calculate the components of the separate assets of the entire marital estate. So we will sit down and do a timeline and we'll say, okay, well, what did you have? Let's run through the timeline. What happened to that? Did that get spent? Did that go into something else? Did you jointly title that thing? And then we craft we have work product that we then provide to the attorney and the client, one of which is a marital balance sheet. And that balance sheet, and the attorneys do this on their own too, right? It's just that we have the marital portion and now we have carved out the separate portion. And sometimes we're on the flip side of the case. So we might have someone who's been making a huge separate property claim about that, and we're the one that doesn't have the separate property. So we then vet that, right? And try to poke holes in that whole thing. So you're right. A lot of it is separate property tracing. You can have a business that was owned before the marriage, And
I'm going to get into that in just a minute. And just for our viewers' benefit, the analytical approach that judges are instructed to use it is very much a timing issue. If you created or received an asset prior to the marriage, that's your separate property, subject to certain conditions. Mm-hmm. Assets that are earned or created during the marriage typically are considered marital assets, and things that are your separate property from before, or maybe grandma passes away and leaves you $100,000 during the marriage, but it's just left to you. That's yours. It's separate property. And so what you have to do is figure out what's the separate premarital or grandma's inheritance kind of thing versus what was earned during the marriage, because that's what gets split between the parties. That's what gets split.
And people don't really understand how that, obviously, when you're living your life, you're not planning for a divorce, right? So they don't always keep it totally clean. Like they may move some of it into another asset that's jointly titled, or they may go the other way and they may add things to grandma's inheritance account that was marital. So part of it is getting all the documentation to be able to kind of unravel what happened, because there are times when we do get people that keep things completely clean, and they just never touch it, and it goes into their grandma inheritance account and they never use it. But a lot of the time it does get kind of muddied up, and we have to kind of come in and unmuddy it.
Well, and I know we've had situations where people will borrow against their 401k and put the money into a house that was premarital, but they do it. I mean, it can be a bowl of spaghetti at some point.
It can be a mess. It can be a mess sometimes, because a lot of times you're talking about years, and then you have to get the documentation to kind of unravel it. And it's hard nowadays. Most institutions don't keep their accounts statements for more than 7 years. Sometimes you can find advisors that keep things longer. Accountants sometimes keep things longer for their clients, but anymore people are being better about destroying documents, so it gets hard. Every once in a while we'll have the one that comes in with the boxes from their basement where they've kept every single account statement since they've been married, or every single receipt, but that's kind of rare.
Well, and I had an uncle who actually built filing cabinets to fit his checks, and he had every check that he'd ever written when he passed away.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we get that sometimes, Bill. I mean, we do. There are people still that just keep every single thing.
And I know, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Most of the time it's a puzzle piece, right? Trying to get the documents.
Well, you touched on something, Debbie, I know you've helped us with in the past, and that is, let's say there's a business. And maybe the business is either started during the marriage or even before the marriage, but it grows substantially during the marriage. And let's say a frequent scenario is the husband is the one who works in the business and the wife stays home or has another job where she's not actively working in the business. How do you help in situations like that if they're getting to the point of divorce?
So that's probably one of the trickiest cases that we come across, is the scenario that you mentioned, because there's case law in Georgia about how to define the marital portion of a business that was set up previously before they were married, but was brought to the marriage. And there's case law that says that any active appreciation to that business during the marriage from the efforts of the parties is in the marital pot. So that, again, becomes a very challenging exercise, because you have to know, what was it valued at the beginning? What is it valued at now? And has that business even appreciated? And then why has it appreciated, right? Is it just something that's sitting there and growing and he or she is not really working in it? Or is it a business where they're actively working in the business? So more and more, we're seeing more and more of that. And there's a lot of case law in Georgia about that. And it's tricky. It's a tricky exercise to go through. But clients don't always know this, right? So this is where you have to educate them, because they may think, well, I had that business before I got married, right? There's no reason that my spouse should be entitled to any of it. But there's actually, case law that kind of bifurcates that business potentially, depending on the facts.
And it is important to note that maybe all the stock in that business is in the husband's name.
Right.
But that doesn't really matter, does it, to the divorce judge?
No, the days of the old days, I wasn't around in the old days. I've been around for a long time, Bill, but maybe not quite at those old of days, where the law was, if it was titled in one person's name, then they kept it, right? And if it was not titled in the wife's name, then she was just going to get alimony because it was all titled in the husband's name. But those days are over. So the titling of it doesn't preclude that asset that grew from efforts or from earnings being in the marital pot. So,
well, and your team brings decades of experience, having done this dozens, hundreds, I don't know, maybe 1,000 times before in all sorts of different scenarios. So you've probably seen pretty much all of it before, right?
We have seen a lot of things. And that's why it's important for us to kind of meet with clients and attorneys and kind of hash out what the circumstances are, what the assets are, because they don't always really pick up on things. They also may not understand how to divide certain things, right? So once you kind of define what the pot is, then you have to be able to split it. And some of those things can be hard to split. right? And so then you got to figure out how to do that. And ultimately, if you have to go before a judge, then the client, even if they're the business owner, they're going to testify, but they can't really attest to the value, right? They can talk about what they think, but you really need an expert to attest to the value in a court. And the judges really appreciate somebody, I think, who can encapsulate what the assets are, how do you split them? What's the tax ramifications of splitting them a certain way? What's the cash flow when you do split it? And those types of things. And so I think it's helpful in some of these cases that are difficult for the judges to have somebody explain it to them that they know has seen this type of thing for a while.
Well, and I know on at least two occasions I can think of right off the top of my head when you've worked with us in the past and gone to court, the judge will be asking you questions directly. Mm-hmm. What about this? What about that?
I love it when the judges do that, because it's a dialogue, right? If they have questions, if they don't quite understand something, I hope in the way that I present to them that they feel comfortable just having a dialogue about that so that we can help them really answer any of their questions.
And I know one of the nice things about working with your firm is that because you're so experienced, if the other side has a forensic accountant, well, I mean, it's kind of a small fraternity of forensic accountants. You know most of them. And a lot of times you can get cases settled if the other side has one that might otherwise go to court and cost tens of thousands of dollars more in litigation fees, right?
That's true, Bill. I mean, we do settle a lot of cases, just like you. And it's really nice when there's another forensic accountant on the other side. We are kind of a little small group of people that specialize in this. And we do work together where we really do just try to get the cases settled. And sometimes that's hard, but sometimes we are able to kind of push it over the edge and get the thing settled. So I'm pretty much a believer that most cases need to settle if possible, right?
But, and I can think of one time in particular where the other lawyer and I said, basically, let's lock the accountants in the room together. And you guys were in there for like an hour or two and you came out and said, we pretty much got it resolved.
Yeah, sometimes that happens. Yeah. And sometimes too, Bill, sometimes because we work with so much in the family law community and know a lot of people, if we are the expert on one side, the other side may say, well, I trust their work. Just let's see what they have. Let's kind of look at it and see if it makes sense. And they may just go with what we say, right? Or they might have another person kind of vet it to see if it makes sense too. So it's helpful. It's like I said, being a specialist in this little industry, it's just the only way to go, because it's like for you guys as lawyers, it's hard to be the master of a lot of different things, right? But if you can kind of specialize, it kind of sets you apart.
Well, and I don't want you to get too much into the secret sauce or the weeds, but when you're looking at a business and trying to put a value on it, what are the kinds of things that you look at?
So we start asking for documents. We look at historical financials of the business, their tax returns, their financials. We start looking for things that we see often, which is personal expenses or other things that may be flowing through the business. We try to fix for some of these things. We also will sit down with management and talk about what their expectations are for the business. They obviously live and breathe it, so they know it the best. So we'll always do a management interview. And then we have databases that we use that have transactions of similar industries, and we will go to those databases and pull comparables of what the sales have been for that particular industry. So we kind of combine all of those tools together to come up with the value.
And I understand that two very qualified forensic accountants or business evaluators can look at a certain set of facts and come up with different values, right?
It's true. Yes, it's true. I mean, you can have some differences, but usually, once again, if we have someone that we know on the other side and we respect them, they respect us, we can at least quantify what the differences are. So they may have a position about a certain thing that's a certain way. And a lot of times we can settle those differences. Sometimes if we can't, we can at least narrow the differences down to just a few things. Even in business valuation, we can do that as well.
Well, you talked about going through the business records and so
Mhm.
forth. Do you ever come across where people are hiding money, hiding assets so that the spouse can't find them?
Well, that is part of our role as the forensic accountant to do that. And I will tell you, we do find it on occasion. A lot of times when we go searching, we may not find it, but what we do provide in those situations is kind of some comfort for the one spouse that thought there was stuff that had gone missing. So, like I said before, if that person is untruthful in one part of their life, their spouse may be thinking they're untruthful in that part of their life. And if they've been uninvolved in the finances and they start to see things that are unusual, right? They automatically the red flags go up and they think, well, that person has been hiding things. So we do on occasion when we do that kind of forensic work where we're looking for hidden assets, find them, but more often than not, we find that, everything is accounted for and then that person feels comfortable with that. But I'll tell you this, Bill, like I have a lot of people who when they have suspicions, right, about things like that. And I tell clients, keep a little log, write down why you're feeling like things are unusual, right? If you see something strange that comes in the mail, take a picture of it, send it to me, right? Be observant, be kind of have your radar up and be watching for little things that might tip you off, and then write them down or take a picture of them and give them to your attorney or give them to us so we can see where you're picking up on this stuff.
Right, because I mean, you and I both have found situations where the spouse was in fact hiding and
Yeah.
hiding a lot.
Yes, there are the times when we actually do find that they are hiding things or they're just not telling you things,
Right.
right? It's kind of one thing to take money and divert it to a bank account somewhere else or something like that, but it's more common to have things where they just don't mention it, right? Or they just don't say, I have these benefits that I'm going to get later on, or I sold my business and I'm going to receive more money down the road or whatever, right? So if someone doesn't tell you about that or disclose that, then you're not going to know about it unless you dig a little bit. So,
Well, and that's why it's important to hire someone like you who knows the questions to ask.
So you're right. So a lot of it is probing and asking questions. We will help attorneys in a lot of cases. We're involved in like depositions of parties. And so we help write questions for the attorneys with all the exhibits and everything. So if we see things that need to be brought up during a deposition, we help all through the process. So we help with mediations, we help with trial, we help from beginning to end. We're kind of like a support staff maybe for the attorneys, right? Where if they have things that they need, we'll help them with an income analysis for their child support worksheet, or we'll help, when they're determining alimony, they want to know what the income is. And somebody says they're not making any money anymore. So we need to dig into that, right? What does that mean? And why do you say that? So, and it's kind of we're at your discretion, right? And sometimes clients just truthfully don't have a lot of money to spend on a forensic accountant. And I pride myself on that, helping attorneys that say, listen, I have a client, they don't have a ton of money, but they have this particular thing. And we just need you to do this one particular thing. They have a house, it's got separate property. We need you to do a Thomas calculation on the house. And we'll just do that one little thing, right? Because I mean, it's expensive to hire another professional. And so we can just do little bifurcated projects sometimes.
And when we were talking earlier, I mean, houses are one of those assets that, let's say wife owned the house beforehand and put some money down, but then she stopped working after they got married to watch the kids, and husband was making money. And then later on they get divorced and wife says, no, that's my house. It's titled in my name. I put the down payment down. But the Thomas calculation helps us put a value on each one of their interests in the house.
Right. Right. Once again, people's perception of what it is isn't always really what the law says it is. And that Thomas case kind of dictates how we handle the houses and things. So sometimes we just need to come in and do the calculation. We just might do that one little thing, right? Because like I said, I mean, there's just, people don't have an unlimited amount of resources, and certainly in tough times and COVID and job uncertainty, people are watching their pennies.
Well, and we've had layoffs. We've had, I had a case not too long ago where the husband's industry has fundamentally been changed because of this, or ex-husband, and he wanted to go back and modify his alimony. So we had to, it was not a case we hired you for, but that's the kind of thing that we've seen in the last 18 months with all of the dislocations and disruptions from COVID.
Yep, you're right. We've done a lot of we'll do modifications. We'll help with determining how the income has changed and things like that. Right.
So let's turn it around a little bit. So do you ever work with the small business owner, in our example, the husband who's been working in the business, to help his side of the case?
Sure. We work on both sides, pretty much, split. Either side will call us. And a lot of times, once again, it becomes a little bit of an educating process. To me, it's almost a little easier to work on the business owner side because you have, more readily accessible information from that person. But if you want to settle a case, you need to be open with the other side, right? So if they have a evaluator or whatever on their side, then we need to try to provide them what they need to feel comfortable, right? But we do work on both sides.
Well, Debbie, how do you charge for your services as a forensic accountant?
So we're kind of similar to the attorneys. We bill hourly, and we have a different rate structure for our different personnel here at the firm. And we charge a retainer, and the retainer, it's a little different than some places. We don't hold it to the end. We will use it up at the beginning of the case and then refund what's left. Or if we need more, we'll just bill, after that for our time. But it's pretty much like what the attorneys do, except sometimes you'll run into people who will hold the retainer to the end. We don't do that. We use it.
Okay. Now, I know, but when we were setting up, getting ready for this, you mentioned that your firm is working on some software. I guess you're beta testing some software that lawyers can use on those cases that may not financially justify getting a forensic accountant involved. Can you tell us about that?
So it's been an interesting process, Bill, because we have found in talking to attorneys that they only hire us for maybe 10% or less of their cases. So there's 90% of the cases that the attorney and the client do not have a forensic accountant. Well, wouldn't it be great if we had some of the tools that we use internally that are technology driven, if we could roll that out to the attorney so they could use some of our tools in the cases where maybe they don't have the money or they don't think they need a forensic accountant. And that was what kind of started the discussion. And we have the first thing that started it was I hired a 30-year-old to come join me. My son came and joined me. He worked at Ernst & Young, and he did forensic work there in big data. He'd handled, they had huge cases, right? And he knew that there was technology that could take PDF documents, convert it to readable format, and then decipher things pick out things from the information. So internally, we've been developing this process, and we're developing something that we hope the attorneys might use where they can take PDF documents, convert them with technology into readable text, and from there have the first module that we're doing is going to spit out a financial affidavit. Your DERFA is going to be pre-populated. And we do this internally. Clients send us their bank statements and their credit cards. We use the technology in-house that we have to pre-populate a financial affidavit. And also in the process of doing that, the attorneys get some free kind of forensic tools, right? Because technology can look at a piece of paper, and if you tell it what I, as a forensic accountant, am interested in seeing on that page, you can program your technology to flag things and pull things out and see things. And that's what we do now with our clients. But this tool allows the attorney the ability to run that process through their client data and pick out things that are forensic, noteworthy type things. So it's new. We're beta testing it. We're going to try to roll it out as through some demos to some attorneys in the metro area. So if you or any of your listeners are interested in knowing more about that, we are just getting ready to do our demo around town. So we'll see. Hopefully it's useful.
Sign me up.
Yeah, we'll see. It's exciting. Technology is the way to go.
Well, Debbie, is there anything else before we wrap up that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Not really, Bill. It's just, this has been a roller coaster of a ride doing this divorce forensic stuff. And I appreciate you doing, this is my first interview on camera. So hopefully, hopefully people will find something useful there. But yeah, it's good. It's good, and it keeps us busy for sure, as you know.
You've done great for your first interview.
Oh, that's good.
If folks want to contact you directly, should they do that? Should they go through their lawyer? What's the best way to be sure that Gibbon Financial is hired?
So the easiest way is for clients to talk to their attorney and write down the name of our firm, Gibbon Financial, tell them you're interested in having them inquire with us. The attorneys will generally contact us, and we have a website that you can look up our contact information or call me directly, either way. But that's usually the easiest way, is to have the attorneys contact us.
Wonderful. Again, my name is Bill Gentry. I'm a divorce and family law attorney at the Gentry Law Firm in Marietta, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. Been practicing law for 35 years. Our team has decades of experience helping people obtain favorable divorce and custody agreements or judgments. If you'd like to schedule a consultation, give us a call. And Debbie, thank you, and y'all have a great day.
Thanks, Bill. You too.